We all know the saying, money makes the world go round. Well, in Formula 1, the story is no different. Most sports like football, rugby or basketball are much easier to have success in without needing lots of money, but Formula 1 and motorsport as a whole is completely the opposite. While other sports could be seen as pay to win, Formula 1 is instead pay to play, or compete in the first place. This means when looking at the balance sheets of Formula 1, there are a lot of zeros. In 2019, Formula 1 made a revenue of $2.02 billion, while the highest paid drivers cash in up to £40 million a year, putting them up there with some of the highest paid athletes in the world. And this trend is not slowing down, with karting now costing six figures in many cases. And this is reflected by the amount of pay drivers that have entered the sport in recent years. But enough complaining about pay drivers for now, this video is about the teams. So Formula 1 isn't just a business, it is a massive billion-dollar industry that employs tens of thousands of people, and the teams are the businesses within the industry that keep the sport going, much like Google and Apple are to the tech industry. And so, like any business, the aim is to make profit, apart from charities and other non-profits, but that's irrelevant. So how do Formula 1 teams make money? And do they even make a profit at all? Stick around for the next 10 minutes or so as I dive into exactly that. Just a little disclaimer, all figures I'll be using in this video are from 2019 because the official figures from 2020 haven't been published yet, and because of the pandemic, those figures wouldn't really be representative anyway. Well, like any business, to talk about profits, you gotta talk about the costs and revenues for that business. Costs being how much the business spends, and revenue being how much the business earns. And so, to make profit, you need to be earning more than you spend, or in other words, your revenue needs to be higher than your costs. And with Formula 1 teams, there are lots of different things that go into the costs and revenues, some you probably didn't even know about. So to begin with, let's dive into the costs of a Formula 1 team, what they spend their money on. Well, the costs can be split into four main categories: research and development, salaries, production, and operations. So, research and development, or otherwise known as R&D, consists of things like wind tunnel testing, track testing, and other forms of testing components to make sure they perform their function. Salaries are pretty self-explanatory. They consist of paying the team's staff, like the marketing team for example, paying the drivers, so, Lewis Hamilton's 40 million quid paycheck, and paying team directors like Toto Wolff, Christian Horner, etc, etc. Production costs for the team involve all the manufacturing of new parts, the purchasing of new components, and either the building or buying of the engine, which can cost upwards of £10 million by itself. And then the final part is the operations, which concerns things like logistics and travel, entertainment for clients, moving everything by freight to long-distance races like Singapore, IT and tech costs, costs of running the factory, professional services like marketing or things like that, and funnily enough, the cost of fuel surprisingly adds up over a season too. And so, if I add various figures to these areas, we can start to see how much the average team spends over a season. In this hypothetical example, the team spends £158 million over the length of a season. Now, remember that number because it's kind of important. Right, so with that £158 million in mind, let's flip the coin and have a look at how an F1 team earns money and generates a revenue. Now, quick disclaimer, this isn't as standard for all teams, meaning some teams make money in different ways to others, but I'll explain. Well, just like the costs, the revenue can be split into 3 or 4 categories depending on the team. Firstly, there's FOM payments, sponsors, investment, and finally, driver-linked income. Let's begin with the most significant one, FOM payments. For those that don't know, FOM stands for Formula 1 Management. To explain how F1 teams are paid by F1, I gotta really split it into 5 columns. So the first column is 36 million quid to every team that has been classified for over 2 seasons. This is known as the column 1 payment, and every single team receives this. Then in the second column is the prize money based on where the team finished the season before. So, for example, Mercedes received $61 million for winning the title, while Williams received just $13 million for coming last. Everything up till now seems pretty fair, right? Well, we aren't done yet. The third column is known as the LST, or long-standing team, basically known as the Ferrari budget because it's only given to them. And it's a whopping $68 million, more than Mercedes received for winning the title. On top of this is the CCB, or Constructors' Championship Bonus, which is a $35 million payment to Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull and McLaren for basically winning a load of titles. And finally, there are a couple of other payments, such as $10 million to Williams as a heritage payment, similar to Ferrari, $35 million to Red Bull for signing the Concord Agreement first, and $35 million to Mercedes for living up to their promise of winning 2 titles. And breathe. Pretty messed up system, huh? Well, for those interested, here is how it all stacks up. But this is only one piece of the puzzle when it comes to earnings. The next is sponsors. I'm sure most people understand how they work, but basically a company like Petronas goes to a team like Mercedes and says, "I want to be on your car so we can advertise ourselves." And Mercedes say, "Okay, great, that'll be $70 million. Job done." That's in very simple terms, but on average, a team has maybe 15 to 25 sponsors who all pay a sum of money to the team to place their logo on the car. And obviously, the better performing teams will have more sponsors because they get more airtime on TV and are more marketable. And it's especially true the other way round. If a team or driver has a terrible reputation, sponsors won't go near them. So, the next form of earning for teams comes as investment from either a parent company or shareholders, where basically, let's say Daimler, want Mercedes to do better in F1, so they give them $80 million per season. This is similar for every team, but obviously some can afford to invest more than others. So, while in 2018 Mercedes got $80 million a year, Racing Point only got $25 million, and for many teams this takes up at least a quarter of all revenue the teams earn, so it's easy to see why a team like Williams are bound to struggle. And finally, the last form is driver-linked income, which is basically when a driver pays the team a sum of money to drive the car, such as Lance Stroll, who paid Williams $30 million in 2017 to drive the car. But obviously this only really takes place in teams lower down the grid who are desperate to get more revenue. Right, so that's all the possible ways that a team can earn money, so let's put it into our hypothetical example. So let's say that our team gets £65 million in FOM payments, £30 million in investment, £50 million from sponsors, and £20 million from driver-linked income. That comes out to £165 million in total revenue. So then, in our hypothetical example, the team would make a £7 million profit. Well, that's basically how an F1 team makes money, but why not look at the reigning champions Mercedes and see how they stack up? Right, so in 2019, Mercedes spent around $425 million through R&D, manufacturing, testing, Lewis's paycheck, and when looking at their income, it's broken down as follows. They received $180 million from the FOM, an $80 million payment from Daimler, and a $160 million payment from sponsors and tech partners. So, doing the maths, in 2019 Mercedes actually made a loss of $5 million, approximately, give or take a few $100,000. And looking at the grid as a whole, it's actually very interesting. Every team bar 2 break even, meaning the costs are the same as the revenue. Obviously, these are rough estimates and expect a small loss or a small gain either way, but the point is, virtually every team uses all their resources to the max, which does make a lot of sense, and here's why. Formula 1 is used by car companies not necessarily to make profit, but instead as a marketing platform to the world to show that their road cars are the best. So, for teams like Mercedes, Renault, Ferrari, etc., Formula 1 brings those companies enormous profits indirectly if someone that likes or watches F1 buys one of their cars. So it really doesn't matter if they aren't making a profit at the end of the day. And after all, if you are making a profit, it shows you have more potential resources to improve the performance of the car, which, after all, is the most important thing. But next season, the whole financial landscape of Formula 1 is going to change dramatically because of the budget cap. I've spoken about this many times in other videos, but basically what it is a maximum amount the teams can spend, which will be set at $145 million. So for any team that spends more than $145 million now, they will need to be much more efficient with how they spend their money. This will no doubt affect teams like Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari the most, and the main aim is to create a more level playing field, which I'm all for. Now you might be wondering, every team's budget in 2019 was above $145 million, which is absolutely true. But because of the effect of the pandemic, many teams' budgets have fallen quite a lot. Now, I'm sure some teams will find loopholes around the regs, but there is no doubt that it's a good thing for Formula 1. So that's a short glimpse into how Formula 1 teams make money and run as a business. And it just shows how efficient some of the lower teams like AlphaTauri are, and it just puts into context how incredible things like Pierre Gasly's win in Monza was. Well, if you enjoyed this new style of video centered more around the financial side of things, like this video and drop a comment below. And as always, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell to be reminded of any new videos.